The massive nude photograph in the exhibition hall tore in two. Alan trembled uncontrollably, his pupils constricting, his hand still clutching the other half of the picture. His phone suddenly rang. The second he answered, Roxanne's frantic voice burst through the speaker. "Alan, did you really send our marriage certificate to my parents? Frank is just my brother. What we have is all an act." Alan's eyes were red, his knuckles white as he gripped the phone. He just choked out, "Why did you take those pictures of me?" There was a pause on the other end. "Are you at the gallery?" Then, Roxanne let out a soft scoff, her tone careless. "You don't understand photography. It's just a way of expressing art. Besides, is there any part of you I haven't seen? I don't mind other women looking, so why should you?" Roxanne's words were like a bucket of ice water, drenching Alan to the bone. Wasn't he allowed to be upset? Alan squeezed his eyes shut, his body so tense he could barely breathe. He never imagined he'd see his own naked body on display at a photography exhibition. Pictures from every angle, most of them taken secretly while he was showering or changing clothes. The most absurd part was that these photos had won the competition's first prize and were displayed in the most prominent spot of the entire exhibition. Even more unthinkable, the award-winning photographer was his own wife. And Alan hadn't known about any of it. "Alan, I finally found you." A clear male voice broke through Alan's thoughts. Frank ran up, panting, and took Alan's arm. His handsome face was covered in sweat. "Alan, it's all my fault. I was just trying to help, but I made a mess of things. I was just trying to help Roxanne with the family marriage arrangement. I didn't think you'd be so upset." Alan pulled his arm away, his sharp gaze sweeping over Frank's face. So this was Roxanne's so-called brother. The childhood sweetheart she was secretly getting engaged to behind his back. "Alan, I never wanted to ruin your relationship with Roxanne. If you don't believe me, you can hit me. I won't fight back." As soon as he finished speaking, Frank grabbed Alan's hand and tried to slap himself across the face with it. Alan was shocked. In the struggle, Frank suddenly threw himself backward, straight into a large vase displayed in the center of the hall. A sharp cry came from behind them. "Alan, I can't believe you'd be so cruel. You're trying to kill Frank." Roxanne rushed forward and wrapped her arms tightly around Frank. Her eyes were like ice as she glared viciously at Alan. The vase on the display stand toppled over, crashing right onto Alan. Shards of ceramic dug into the back of his hand, and blood began to flow freely. "Frank, are you okay?" Roxanne stared with concern at a small red scrape on Frank's arm. Her face was a mask of anxiety. A chill spread through Alan's heart. He opened his mouth, but swallowed the explanation he was about to give. Alan knew that right now Roxanne only trusted Frank. Whatever he said would be useless. The man in her arms coughed twice, and Roxanne immediately lowered her head, her voice softening. "Don't be scared, Frank. I'm here." "Roxanne, don't blame Alan. It's all my fault. Don't speak up for him. If it weren't for him, you wouldn't be like this." The commotion Frank caused had drawn a crowd. Someone with sharp eyes noticed that Alan was the same man in the exhibition photos. "It really is him. If that were me, I'd have to cover my face just to walk outside. What do you know? It's called sacrificing for art. I wonder what the going rate is for hooking up with a photographer like her. Why don't you ask him?" The humiliating comments were all directed at Alan. His mind went blank. He watched, numb, as Roxanne scooped Frank up into her arms and ran outside, not even sparing him a single glance. He sat on the floor, his light-colored pants soaked with blood. His heart felt like it had been torn open, with a cold wind blowing right through it. His eyelashes fluttered. Alan pulled out his phone and dialed his most recent contact. "Mr. Wong, I'll do it. I'll join the crew for the documentary shoot next month. You finally came to your senses. Great, I'll see you in Damascus, then." The director's slightly pleased voice came from the other end. After hanging up, Alan left the exhibition center. The wind whipped through his short hair. A sign by the entrance displayed the name of the famous photographer, Roxanne. A sour feeling flashed in his eyes. He looked away and staggered toward the hospital. They had been married for 3 whole years, and nobody knew he and Roxanne were husband and wife. From a campus romance that everyone envied to walking down the aisle, Alan had naively believed they would be happy forever. When Roxanne said she didn't have money for a wedding, Alan didn't doubt her. Not until he accidentally saw her phone. He saw her agree without hesitation to her parents' plan for her to get engaged to Frank, promising him a grand wedding. In that moment, the self-deception Alan had lived with for 3 years shattered completely. For Roxanne, he had given up the opportunity to join the film crew and shoot documentaries. Now, Alan didn't want to miss his chance again. The pungent smell of disinfectant was so strong it made Alan nauseous. He clutched his chest and dry heaved a few times. His brow twitched uneasily. Alan, right? Your hand will be fine if you take care of it, but you've been under too much stress lately. It's causing digestive issues, so you need to manage it properly. Flipping through the chart, Alan looked up at the doctor in a daze. He opened his mouth. Doctor, I've been feeling nauseous lately. Is it my stomach? The doctor handed the chart to Alan. Yes, excessive mental stress can cause physical discomfort. I'll prescribe some medication to help regulate it. Make sure you rest and avoid cold or raw foods. Alan took a deep breath and left the exam room with the prescription. He clutched the payment slip in his hand, every step out of the hospital feeling heavy. From down the hall, a familiar voice drifted through the crack of a hospital room door. Frank, don't worry. I won't have a child with Alan. He doesn't deserve it. Frank sat on the hospital bed, his pretty face streaked with tears. Roxanne was comforting her childhood sweetheart, saying that her husband didn't deserve to have a child with her. Alan felt as if he'd been plunged into an icy cellar. The voices from the room continued. You've been married for 3 years, and Alan's so handsome. Could you really resist? Besides, it's not up to you whether you have a baby or not. Roxanne cooed at him, wiping the tears from his face. Her beautiful features held a tenderness Alan had never seen. She scoffed, her voice full of scorn. I've never had sex with him. Ever since I married Alan, my friends have been sleeping with him. He's filthy to me. His pupils constricted, his mind a complete blank. When had he ever slept with other women? Before Alan could process it, Roxanne's lazy voice drifted out again. I made a deal with them. Every time they sleep with Alan, they give me $1 million. I'll use that money to buy you whatever you want. Frank, I've been saving myself just for you. A cold chill ran down Alan's spine. His hands, hanging at his sides, clenched into tight fists. He never imagined his own wife would sling such mud at him just to please her boy toy. How dare she? He reached out, ready to push the door open and confront Roxanne. Suddenly, a slender hand grabbed his wrist, pulling him into the adjacent fire escape. Another hand clamped over his mouth. He struggled instinctively. Who are you? This is a hospital. An inexplicable fear quickly consumed him. Wow, you forget a girl as soon as you're dressed, huh? A sultry voice whispered in his ear. The hand gripping his wrist loosened its grip. Alan turned his head and met a pair of narrow, playful eyes. He took a step back to create some distance. He recognized her. It was one of Roxanne's friends, Laura. But they barely knew each other. Trying to compose himself, Alan stared warily at Laura. What do you want? I'm telling you, Roxanne is right next door. Laura cut him off. Alan, after all this, you still think that woman deserves to be your wife. Laura tugged on his wrist, pulling him into her embrace. Her fingertips traced the hard line of his ear. A tingling warmth spread through him, and Alan couldn't help but shrink back. Roxanne was drugging the milk she gave you every night. And from the day you got married, I was the only one sleeping in your bed. Every single time. Alan trembled, his eyes bloodshot as he stared at Laura. Why are you telling me this? He demanded. Laura's warm hand moved to gently cup her own stomach, as if holding a treasure. Her hot breath tickled his ear. I just want you to see her for who she really is. Also, I'm pregnant, and it's yours. Alan shoved Laura away with all his might, raised his hand, and slapped her across the face without mercy. Get out. He seethed, shaking with rage, tears welling in his eyes. A playful tone entered her voice. Don't be so mean. You didn't know before. Now that you do, want to give it another try? Alan turned to leave, but just as he opened the fire escape door, he stopped. He paused, turning his head back slightly. Still, thank you for telling me. Even if you're probably no better than she is. Laura watched his tall back, her tongue pressing against the inside of her cheek. He hadn't taken more than 2 steps.
Alan.
Roxanne's voice came from behind him. He froze for a second. Are you here to apologize to Frank? Good, you have some sense. She didn't even glance at his bandaged hand. The first thing out of her mouth was demanding an apology for Frank. My parents are here too. You can explain to them that the marriage certificate was fake. I don't need to tell you what to say, do I? Roxanne dragged him toward the hospital room without even asking his opinion. Alan let out a cold, mocking laugh. Right. Roxanne could personally deliver him into someone else's bed. Why would she care about his opinion? A hard shove from behind sent him stumbling to the doorway of the room. Several pairs of eyes landed on him at once. From his side, Roxanne hissed in a low voice, "Apologize. What are you waiting for?" Alan glanced at her. 1,000 emotions churned within him. In an instant, he completely abandoned the idea of cursing them out. They wanted him to apologize? Fine. He'd give them what they wanted for now. I'm sorry, Frank. I misunderstood you. Wasn't Roxanne selling him out to other women for money? Well, he didn't mind giving her a little gift in return. Roxanne's father looked him up and down with disdain. Some people spend all day trying to social climb. They'll even forge a marriage certificate. Roxanne, you should stay away from people like this. Alan's fingers, hidden in his sleeves, tightened slightly, but his expression remained impassive. It's okay, Alan. It was my own fault. Roxanne's father took Frank's hand. Our Frank is so considerate. But this isn't something a simple apology can fix. I'm fine, don't make things hard for Alan. A flash of triumph in Frank's eyes was clearly caught by Alan. Roxanne frowned in disapproval. Frank, you're just too kind. That's why people walk all over you. After saying that, she shot a glare at Alan. Alan was speechless. He almost wanted to applaud Roxanne for her dedicated defense. What a joke. Anyone who didn't know better would think he was the other man. He stood up straight. Then how can this be resolved? You'll stay here and take care of Frank until he's discharged. Roxanne's casual voice cut in first. She didn't even look at Alan, focusing on peeling a piece of fruit. Alan stood there, stunned, and instinctively glanced at his own hand, which was bandaged up like a dumpling. He snorted inwardly, then raised his right hand, his face a mask of grievance, his eyes red. Frank is so kind. He wouldn't make an injured person take care of him, would he? The hidden smile on Frank's face froze. He grit his teeth and forced out, Roxanne, maybe we should just forget it. Roxanne just glanced at Alan. You still have your left hand, don't you? A self-mocking smile touched Alan's lips. How could he forget? Roxanne couldn't care less if he lived or died. In her eyes, there was only her childhood sweetheart, Frank. Roxanne, I don't have any money on me. Taking care of Frank, I can't just feed him oatmeal, can I? Alan lowered his gaze, his thick lashes hiding the emotion in his eyes. When they first got married, Roxanne was just a photographer's assistant who could only afford the most basic camera. Meanwhile, Alan, with his competition awards, had already landed a job at a TV network and was at a critical point in his career. For Roxanne, Alan gave up the opportunity to shoot a documentary. He used his own unpublished photos to enter Roxanne into a prestigious photography competition, helping her win first prize. That was how Roxanne finally made a name for herself, gradually becoming a famous photographer. Just when Alan thought their lives would get better and better, Frank appeared. That's when he learned that Roxanne had always had a first love, a childhood sweetheart she could never forget. Roxanne told him she only saw Frank as a brother now. Thinking of this, Alan's lips curled in contempt. A brother she was saving herself for. More like, he was done with her. But the money, he was getting every last cent back. There's $100,000 on this card. Take it. Roxanne reluctantly handed him a bank card. Alan took it with a smile, catching a glimpse of Frank on the hospital bed, who looked angry enough to shatter his teeth. He took Roxanne's arm and said pitifully, "Roxanne, when my hand gets better, can I come stay at your place? My school dorm is too crowded. I'm not used to it. Frank, you and Roxanne are about to get engaged. That's your home. You can stay whenever you want." Roxanne's father's teasing voice chimed in. Then, as if remembering something, he turned and glared at Alan. "Even though you're taking care of Frank, I'm warning you, don't get any funny ideas. Otherwise," he warned. Alan kept his head down, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Don't worry. I definitely won't bother Roxanne and Frank. Just breaking them up wasn't enough. He was going to ruin the reputations of this despicable pair." Roxanne's father looked him up and down and snorted. "What are you standing around for? Go get Frank's room ready." Alan nodded impassively and left. The moment he turned, his face returned to its usual cold indifference. "Get Frank's room ready? In his dreams. You certainly kept me waiting." A familiar, sultry voice spoke up. Alan looked over and saw Laura leaning against a car, her arms crossed. Alan frowned slightly. "I didn't ask you to wait for me." Laura bent down and opened the passenger door, a faint smile on her lips. "You're right, that was on me. So, can you give me a chance to drive you home?" It was intoxicating. The refusal was on the tip of his tongue, but Alan swallowed it back down. He glanced behind him. His eyes were like stars. Sure, if Roxanne could do it, why couldn't he? Besides, Roxanne was the one who personally delivered him to Laura's bed. He'd settle that score sooner or later. As soon as Alan got into the passenger seat, he noticed a faded good luck charm hanging from the rearview mirror. He froze while buckling his seatbelt. The character for his last name, stitched into the bottom right corner, was worn and faded from being touched so often. Laura followed his gaze, and a flash of panic crossed her narrow, phoenix-like eyes. Alan crossed his arms, a meaningful look on his face as he looked at Laura. He tilted his chin up. "Care to explain? Why do you have the good luck charm I got for Roxanne?" Laura coughed into her fist. "I took it. Does she deserve to wear a charm you got for her?" Alan raised an eyebrow but said nothing, turning his gaze away. The car stopped outside a villa. The woman's long fingers tapped on the steering wheel. "Alan, when is it my turn?" Her tone was plaintive, but her eyes were smiling. Alan glanced at her out of the corner of his eye, his arms still crossed. "Can you get me a pinhole camera?" Laura paused for a second, then picked up her phone and made a call. "Send 2 pinhole cameras to the residence." Alan stared at her face, his eyelids trembling. He hadn't expected Laura to do it without even asking why. A slender hand waved in front of his face. Alan snapped back to reality, his thick lashes cast down, hiding the expression in his eyes. "I'm heading in." He opened the car door in one smooth motion. By the time he looked back, the Rolls-Royce that had been parked outside the villa was long gone. The pinhole cameras arrived faster than he expected. Alan installed the 2 cameras in the living room and bedroom. Just as he finished, the roar of a car engine sounded from the main gate.
"Alan,
"Get out here and carry the luggage," Roxanne's father's loud voice echoed. Alan rolled his eyes mercilessly and didn't move. The group came in from outside. "This is such a bother for you, Alan." Frank leaned against Roxanne's chest, looking at Alan with provocation. "Frank, don't be polite with him. He's here specifically to take care of you." Roxanne's father looked him up and down with disdain, then barked, "What are you standing there for? Don't you know to lend a hand?" Alan's eyelids fluttered. He shrank back as if scared by Roxanne's father. "Uncle, I still have to clean Frank's room. If I move the luggage, I won't have any energy left to clean." Roxanne's father glared at Alan, then resignedly carried Frank's luggage upstairs. "Roxanne, are these all your old award-winning photos? They're amazing." Frank looked at the photos hanging on the wall, his eyes full of admiration, which Roxanne clearly enjoyed. Glancing at Alan sitting on the sofa, Roxanne straightened her back. "That's all in the past." Alan listened to the conversation from a distance, a contemptuous smile on his lips. He really didn't expect Roxanne to be so shameless. But it did remind him of something. He got up and walked toward Roxanne. He raised his eyes slightly. Roxanne, I need to talk to you. Roxanne turned to look at him. When she saw Alan's handsome face, her heart skipped a beat. Frank, go back to your room first. Frank pouted reluctantly and went back to the bedroom. Only then did Roxanne turn her attention to Alan, frowning unhappily. How many times do I have to say it? My engagement with Frank is fake, just to make my parents happy. What more do you want? Alan's tone faltered, then became slightly mocking. It's not about that. Meeting Roxanne's suspicious gaze, he gestured with his chin toward the photos on the wall. If Frank knew he was being kept in the dark, he'd be really hurt, wouldn't he? Roxanne's face went pale. She stared at Alan with a guarded expression. If you say anything about this, it won't be good for either of us. She glanced at Frank's closed bedroom door and deliberately lowered her voice. Frank admires you so much. What if he finds out it was all fake? Shut up. Alan lowered his eyes, hiding the fleeting disdain. Roxanne angrily pulled a bank card from her pocket, threw it on the floor, and gritted out, "Keep this to yourself and take it to your grave." Alan bent down to pick up the card, dusted it off, and the smile on his face widened. He watched Roxanne's angry back as she walked away and scoffed. Useless. In the bedroom, Roxanne lay on the bed with her arm around Frank, a cigarette held between her fingers, the faint glow of its ember flickering. Roxanne, is Alan still mad at you about the nude photos? No. Roxanne exhaled a smoke ring, her expression unreadable. Then what if Alan divorces you over this? Frank propped himself up, his eyes on Roxanne's smoke-shrouded face, a flash of disgust crossing his features. Roxanne sneered dismissively. Divorce? Who else would want him besides me? The cigarette between her fingers was stubbed out with a sizzle. Besides, he loves me so much he was willing to give up his career for me. He'd never be able to leave me. Roxanne's face was filled with triumphant certainty, completely missing the ugly expression on Frank's face beside her. The arm around Frank tightened slightly. What? Are you jealous? He forced a smile and pushed Roxanne away slightly. No, I'm just worried Alan will be upset. Alan took off his headphones, coldly watching everything on the monitor. His thumb pressed save recording. Then he tossed his phone aside and lay down on the bed. Even though he already knew the truth from Laura, he couldn't help but feel disgusted. Married for 3 years, he couldn't figure out if Roxanne was just a great actress or if he was truly blind. To only now see her true colors, it was sickening. Early the next morning, just as Alan pushed open his bedroom door, he ran right into a very excited Frank. Upon seeing Alan, the excitement on his face visibly froze. A hint of triumph flashed in his eyes. Morning, Alan. Alan gave him a quizzical look, remembering his conversation with Roxanne yesterday. He gave a slight nod in greeting. Frank clutched his phone tightly and scurried back into his bedroom. He unlocked his phone, the screen already open to his photo album. Several photos were credited to Alan. A smile spread across his lips. He opened X, uploaded the photos, and even paid to get them trending. After all that, Frank turned off his screen, the smile never leaving his face. He refused to believe this wouldn't be enough to make Roxanne and Alan divorce. The title of Mrs. White belonged to him, Frank. When Laura's call came, Alan was still at the dining table, spooning hot porridge into his mouth. Alan? Are you okay? Do you need my help? Laura's slightly urgent voice came through the phone. What? The stuff online, haven't you seen it?
Alan instinktively glanced upstairs.
Before Laura could say anything else, he hung up. Perhaps because Roxanne was relatively famous, the post gained traction very quickly. The content was all about defending Roxanne. It claimed that years ago, Alan, banking on his family's money, had used Roxanne's work to win competitions. It even included a side-by-side comparison of Alan's and Roxanne's award-winning photos. The post confidently stated that if they weren't from the same photographer, how could the style and post-processing of the two works be almost identical? I knew a man couldn't take such soulful photographs. Isn't this fraud still working at a TV station? I saw this Alan guy's nude photos at an exhibit last time I went. Well, I guess we know how he got his job at the TV station. Alan casually scrolled through the comments. A solid wall of insults and slander. He placed his phone face down on the table and scoffed. Roxanne and Frank really were a match made in heaven. Both of their tactics were so low-class and pathetic. Roxanne walked in wearing a gray sweatsuit, holding a bag from a popular breakfast spot downtown. Alan stood up and blocked her path, biting his tongue hard until his eyes instantly reddened. Roxanne, have you seen the news on social media? What am I going to do? Roxanne's brows knitted together. You're not a photographer anymore. This won't affect you. Just wait for it to blow over.
Alan pouted.
Or maybe I should just tell everyone the truth. You're famous now. A slender hand suddenly clamped around his neck, cutting off the rest of his words. He was forced to meet Roxanne's warning gaze. She spoke in a voice only they could hear. No one is to speak of this. Alan's eyes were filled with ice. To Roxanne, only profit and reputation mattered. Roxanne, where are my dumplings? Frank's voice, accompanied by footsteps, drifted over. Roxanne shoved Alan away and shot him a warning glare. Then she headed toward the stairs. I knew you were the best to me, Roxanne. Frank happily took the breakfast, his eyes darting toward Alan. He noticed his pale face and red-rimmed eyes. His smile widened. Alan crossed his arms, coldly watching the two of them act so intimate as if no one else was there. Frank, as if just noticing Alan, quickly let go. Alan, don't misunderstand. Roxanne and I have been close since we were kids. Alan's lips curled slightly. Before he could say anything, he heard Roxanne's voice. Frank, you don't need to explain to him. A flash of mockery crossed his eyes. This was the wife he had been married to for 3 years. It's okay, Frank. Your childhood sweethearts, after all. I understand. Alan deliberately lifted his dejected face, forcing a smile. Frank took in his expression, raised his chin slightly, his eyes filled with triumph. Alan, you're so great. Will you be the best man at my and Roxanne's wedding? Please? He stepped forward and took Alan's hand, shaking it coaxingly. Alan's gaze fell on their joined hands. He gently pulled away, meeting Frank's provocative expression. Sure. Roxanne's brows furrowed slightly, her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked at Alan with suspicion. If you mind, you don't have to. A faint smile still lingered on Alan's face as he turned to her. You and Frank are faking it. Why would I mind? A wedding reception. Perfect opportunity. Frank stared at him, his hands by his sides unconsciously clenching into fists. He would make this wedding real sooner or later. Alan, he suppressed the turmoil in his heart. Let's go try on our suits then. A black Cayenne pulled up in front of the bridal shop. Alan looked up at the sign, the most famous bridal shop in the city. He couldn't help but laugh coldly to himself. When he and Roxanne got married, forget a wedding dress. They couldn't even afford to rent a decent suit. And he had foolishly believed their lives would get better and better. He glanced at Roxanne trying on wedding dresses, opened the voice recorder on his phone, and then stepped through the curtain. Alan, thank you for agreeing to be my best man. Frank's eyes curved into a smile, but if you looked closely, there was no mirth in them at all. Alan, if I were you, I would have divorced her a long time ago. Frank's light voice reached his ears. He glanced at the mirror in front of him. Then he quickly lowered his eyes. It's fine. You and Roxanne are just faking it, so it doesn't matter if we don't divorce. Frank couldn't see Alan's expression, but after hearing his words, he let out a scoff. He turned to face Alan, looking down on him. Alan, you still don't know, do you? From the day you married Roxanne, the person sleeping next to you every night has been someone else. Alan's pupils constricted. He feigned disbelief and took 2 steps back. How is that possible? Frank savored the expression on his face. He brushed past Alan. He patted Alan's shoulder, then pulled back the curtain and walked out, leaving Alan alone in the dressing room. Alan wiped the expression from his face and took out his phone. The screen showed it was still recording. He pressed stop. He looked up at his reflection in the mirror, his knuckles white as he gripped the phone. He slowly curled his lips into a cold sneer. The night before the wedding, Alan received a message from the film crew, telling him to meet at the airport the next evening. He typed out a quick "got it" and looked up at the festive decorations throughout the villa, clenching his fists. Tomorrow, he was going to give Roxanne a big surprise. "Alan, we're counting on you today." Frank, dressed in a multi-million-dollar suit, sat in front of the mirror and spoke with a half-smile, his gaze on Alan filled with contempt. He had told Alan everything so clearly, yet this stupid man still wouldn't get a divorce. "You'd better behave today. If Frank hadn't requested it, do you think you'd have a chance to be the best man?" Roxanne's father stood to the side, looking Alan up and down and warning him fiercely. Alan bent down to straighten a wrinkle in Frank's suit, a faint smile on his handsome face. "Uncle, I couldn't be happier to attend Frank and Roxanne's wedding." Of course he was happy. This wedding was just the beginning of Roxanne's downfall. Roxanne's father shot him a suspicious look and snorted. "You'd better mean that. I'm gonna go check on the venue." Alan turned and left the room, rubbing his cheeks, which were stiff from smiling. As he turned, he met Laura's playful, beautiful eyes. Alan froze for a second, glanced at the bridesmaid tag on her chest, and couldn't help but frown. "She asked you to be a bridesmaid?" Laura looked down at the tag, a disdainful curl to her lips. "Her? She doesn't have the right. I came on my own." Laura took 2 steps forward, her gaze softening. She lowered her voice. "Alan, just say the word, and I'll help you ruin this wedding. This wedding is too small scale." He looked down, a gentle curve to his lips, but the voice that came from his throat was chillingly cold. "Okay, I understand." Alan looked up and saw the tips of her ears were bright red. He leaned in slightly and placed a light kiss on the corner of Laura's lips, then turned and walked toward the venue. Only after Alan's figure disappeared around the corner did Laura snap back to reality. She touched her lips, her heart pounding in her chest. She pulled out her phone and called her assistant, secretly arranging for a few tabloid reporters to be there. The venue was decorated with all kinds of fresh flowers. Alan gave them a cursory glance and quickly headed for the control booth. He swapped out the music USB with his own. After that, he went back to his room, changed, and sat in a corner of the venue with his already packed suitcase. The wedding started smoothly. Frank, in a pristine white suit, walked arm in arm with Roxanne. The wedding march played in the background, and their wedding photos scrolled across the big screen. Suddenly, a commotion erupted, followed by Frank's voice. "You get slept with once, and those people give Roxanne $1 million. Taking nude photos of Alan. Aren't you afraid he'll divorce you?" The images on the big screen were replaced, and the entire venue descended into chaos. Who would have known that my work was used to enter the competition for me back then? Alan watched the chaos unfold with satisfaction. He picked up his suitcase, glanced at the panicked white family and Frank, and left without looking back. Tabloid reporters appeared out of nowhere, snapping pictures of Roxanne. Her face flushed red, and she screamed in frustration. "No pictures." The noise drowned out her voice. "Roxanne, let's go." Frank helped Roxanne's father up from the ground, bending over to avoid the reporters' cameras as best he could. Roxanne looked back and saw her father leaning on Frank's shoulder, his eyes shut tight, his face pale. She stopped caring about the reporters and followed Frank into the hotel. Less than an hour after the incident, the internet was flooded with news about the White family. This is basically bigamy, right? So shameless, secretly taking nude photos of someone for profit. So all those works were Alan's. Roxanne was the real fraud. What a plot twist. Shameless, despicable people. Frank snatched Roxanne's phone and took her hand in his. He said softly, "Roxanne, don't look at it. Don't worry, no matter what, I'll never leave you." Roxanne's face was tense. She said nothing, her gaze fixed on her father in the hospital bed. Frank followed her gaze. "I'll take care of your dad for the next few days. You go deal with all this. Find out who's behind it. Thank you, Frank." Roxanne let out a heavy breath and walked out of the room. She leaned against the hallway window, lit a cigarette, and took a deep drag. She pulled out her phone and called Laura. Laura's casual voice came on the line, and Roxanne clenched her fist. "Laura, can you do me a favor?" Help me find out who was behind what happened at the wedding today. Roxanne, I can't help you with that. Don't contact me again. Before Roxanne could say anything, the line went dead. She punched the air in frustration. When she found the person responsible, she would make them get on their knees and beg for forgiveness. Roxanne stubbed out her cigarette on the windowsill and went back into the room. Roxanne, I just had someone check the security footage from the venue. Take a look. Seeing Frank's hesitant expression, Roxanne took the phone suspiciously. She saw Alan on the screen, dressed in a best man suit. Roxanne's eyes widened in fury as she stared at the screen, her grip tightening uncontrollably. Alan. It was Alan. Roxanne, it's all my fault. If Alan hadn't provoked me that day, I wouldn't have lost my temper and said all that. Frank watched her expression and squeezed out 2 lines of tears. She threw the phone back at Frank. It's not your fault. Roxanne never imagined that the mastermind behind it all was Alan. She took out her phone to call him, but was met with a cold, robotic female voice. Sorry, the number you have dialed. Roxanne grit her teeth and tried again, stubbornly. The same response. She opened her messenger app. The moment she sent Alan a message, a red exclamation mark popped up on the screen. Roxanne froze. Alan had actually blocked her. Her slender hands clenched into fists, her knuckles turning white. For 3 years, she had never mistreated Alan. She had always given him whatever he asked for. Not only did Alan ruin her reputation, but he dared to block her. Roxanne grabbed her coat and rushed out, nearly bumping into Frank. Roxanne, where are you going? Hearing the familiar name, Roxanne was dazed for a moment. Realizing it was Frank, she composed herself. I'm gonna find Alan. I'll pick you up from the hospital later. Frank bit his lower lip, staring unwillingly at Roxanne's retreating back. He took a deep breath. After tonight, he didn't believe Roxanne would still be able to tolerate Alan. The car stopped in front of the White family villa. The warm yellow light from inside offered a hint of comfort in the dark night. Roxanne's heart settled a bit. She knew it. After marrying her, Alan had no one to rely on. Where else could he go but home?
Alan.
Come out. Her voice echoed through the empty villa. Her eyes were fixed on the top of the stairs, but the figure she expected never appeared.
Alan.
You did it, but you don't have the guts to face me. Is that it? Roxanne gripped the railing and took the stairs 2 at a time. Miss, the master didn't come home tonight. Just as she was about to go into her room, the housekeeper's voice came from downstairs. Roxanne frowned and looked down. Didn't come home? The housekeeper nodded under her gaze. Roxanne stared at the housekeeper for a long time, then let out a cold laugh. Alan was getting smart now, even convincing the housekeeper to lie for him. She turned and pushed open Alan's bedroom door. A soft orange lamp was on by the bed. The room was filled with the faint scent of his body wash. No one was there. Roxanne's hand on the doorknob tightened. A sense of panic inexplicably washed over her. Alan? She called out tentatively. Only the echo of her own voice answered. The panic in her heart grew. She pulled out her phone and called Alan again. The same cold, mechanical voice. Roxanne finally realized, belatedly, that Alan had blocked her. Blocked her number and her on social media. A thought began to form in her mind. Roxanne shook her head violently. She opened Alan's closet. All his clothes were hung neatly inside, and all his expensive watches. Roxanne suddenly remembered there was one other place Alan could be. The TV station. Yes, Alan must have gone to the station to hide from her. Roxanne turned and went downstairs, grabbing her car keys and heading out. Alan was avoiding her, so he must know he'd done something wrong. As long as he agreed to let her take a few more sets of nude photos, different styles this time, she could try to forgive him. On the way, Roxanne practically floored the gas pedal. When she arrived at the TV station, the entire building was still brightly lit. She let out a long sigh of relief. Hi, I'm looking for Alan. Roxanne suppressed her impatience.
Alan?
I don't think he's here. The receptionist was looking for something and didn't even look up. Not here? Then where did he go? Roxanne pressed urgently, leaning over the marble counter. her body almost halfway into the reception area. The receptionist instinctively took 2 steps back, staring at her warily. Alan signed up for the documentary shoot today. As for where he went, I'm not sure. Roxanne stood there, stunned. A documentary shoot. Alan was gone. She stood frozen, finally understanding the source of the dread that had been clinging to her. Impossible. A documentary shoot could take a year and a half at least. Wasn't Alan worried at all about something happening between her and Frank? Or did he just not care? The phone on the coffee table suddenly rang. Roxanne snatched it and put it to her ear. Alan, you finally decided to call me. The words had just left her mouth when she heard a soft, delicate male voice on the other end. There was a hint of a sob in it. Roxanne, why haven't you come to get me yet? I'm so scared all by myself. It was Frank. Roxanne didn't even notice the flash of disappointment in her own heart. She rubbed her tired brow, her voice low. Okay, I'm on my way. After hanging up, Roxanne was about to get up when she suddenly remembered. She and Alan were legally married. She could report him missing. The police would definitely be able to find him. She opened a drawer, found her marriage certificate with Alan, stuffed it in her pocket, and immediately ran out. She picked up Frank from the hospital and then drove toward the police station. Roxanne, where are you going so late? Frank's hands, resting on his knees, clenched into tight fists. He had just heard Roxanne mistake him for Alan to file a report. As she spoke, the car pulled up in front of the police station. Without waiting for Frank, Roxanne hastily opened the car door and ran inside. Watching her hurried, anxious back, Frank felt a bad premonition rising in his gut. He quickly followed her. Roxanne, what's the rush? Can't you find Alan? Roxanne ignored him and grabbed a police officer. Hello, I can't find my husband. Can you help me? The officer looked up at her, his tone all business. Let me see your marriage certificate to prove you're husband and wife. Roxanne pulled out the certificate and handed it over. The officer just glanced at it briefly, then frowned. This certificate is fake. It's not valid. How can it be fake? We went to City Hall to get it. The officer tossed the certificate back, pointing to the seal on the cover. The seal is wrong. It's definitely a fake. Frank, standing beside her, hadn't expected Roxanne and Alan's marriage certificate to be a forgery. Roxanne, a fake certificate is perfect. This way, you and I can get a real one. You don't like Alan anyway, so why not just let it go? Frank's eyes curved as he tugged on Roxanne's sleeve, whining. His head snapped to the side. His fair cheek instantly swelled up, stinging painfully. Roxanne, you? Frank looked at Roxanne in disbelief, only to see her narrow eyes filled with an icy coldness. An uncontrollable shiver ran through him. Shut up. My marriage to Alan can't be fake. Roxanne snatched the marriage certificate and stormed out. Her mind was a chaotic mess, a loud ringing in her ears. How could her marriage certificate with Alan be fake?
Alan?
Right. Alan must have left because he was upset about Frank. As long as she cut ties with Frank, Alan would find out and come back. She had done some things wrong. When she found Alan, she would apologize and they would surely make up. Then they would go get a real marriage certificate. She could even overlook what had happened this time. Roxanne had figured it out. She actually did still like Alan. It was just that the gap between them was too big. So big that all she had left in front of him was her pride, which made her use all the wrong methods. From now on, it wouldn't be like this anymore. The first time Alan set foot on this war-torn land, all he could see was a city in ruins. Unexpectedly, Alan didn't experience any trouble adjusting to the new environment. He walked through this devastated land with his camera. Personal belongings were scattered everywhere. The streets that were still passable were filled with cars desperate to evacuate. A group of children watched him timidly from behind a destroyed building. Seeing their young faces, Alan subconsciously touched his stomach. He took out a few pieces of candy he had prepared and handed them over. Thank you. The children were very well behaved, each taking one piece. They didn't eat them, but carefully tucked them into their pockets. Alan knew that in this war-torn city, a piece of candy was a precious treasure. Alan, Come back. We're heading to the shelter. Mr. Wong, the team leader, stood on a slab of rock in the distance, waving at him. Alan saved the footage on his camera and then walked toward the director. He wanted to show vulgar photographers like Roxanne what real photography was. The lens should not be aimed at lewd and pornographic images. And art was not just that one thing. Alan, it's great that you could join the documentary shoot this time. Don't worry, when we get back, I'll definitely get the network to give you a raise. Mr. Wong patted Alan's shoulder with satisfaction, his sun-darkened face beaming. Thanks, Mr. Wong. The van bounced along the rough road. Just when Alan thought he was about to be sick, the vehicle finally stopped. The building in front of them could only be described as dilapidated. This is actually one of the better places to stay. Mr. Wong sighed and waved away the dust-filled air in front of him. It's fine. It's great. Alan was the first to go inside. Mr. Wong assigned a few rooms. Alan was paired with a somewhat emotional young man. On the way there, his eyes had been red the entire time, tears constantly welling up. Alan, you can take the bed on the inside tonight. The young man sniffled and put his things on the relatively clean table. Alan didn't refuse. His bed was the only one in the room with a blanket. He opened his phone and saw the news about the White family spreading like wildfire online. In just one day, the White family had become notorious in the city. Found some of that male photographer Alan's work. It's really soulful. I saw it too. So atmospheric. The composition, lighting, and post-processing are all amazing. Such a talented male photographer had nude photos of him taken and exhibited by his own wife. That bitch should die. Public opinion online had completely turned. The previous wave of insults had vanished. Alan's lips curled into a slight smile. He clicked on a video in one of the posts. At the wedding venue, Roxanne's family was scurrying away from the tabloid reporters like rats. The big screen was on a loop, showing intimate moments between Roxanne and Frank. The City Photography Association had already issued a statement, revoking all of Roxanne's awards and returning the works from her so-called exhibition. He switched off the screen, satisfied. Now, Roxanne would never be able to make it in the photography world again. Alan, Mr. Wong is calling us for dinner. Maria knocked on the door and threw on a jacket. Okay, I'll be right there. Alan slipped his phone into his pocket. Seeing the dust swirling outside the glass window, blurring his vision, he paused. He pulled out a scarf and wrapped it around his face, then pulled open the door. Laura was leaning against the doorframe, one hand propped up, her sleeve rolled up to reveal the toned, fair skin of her forearm. The moment he saw Laura, Alan froze, subconsciously asking, "What are you doing here?" Laura's lips were pressed together. She didn't answer, a dark emotion swirling in her eyes. Her clenched fist slowly relaxed. A slender arm wrapped around Alan's waist, her sultry voice tinged with a hint of grievance. "Alan, don't just leave me without a word." Her dark head buried itself in Alan's shoulder. The warmth of another person's skin against his made him freeze up completely. Besides, little Luna can't be without her dad. Can she? Her voice was low, with a lazy, roguish edge. Alan looked down, his thick lashes hiding the emotion in his eyes. He took 2 steps back, putting some distance between them. "I'm not going back. I have something I want to do here." He didn't understand. What else could Laura be doing in Damascus besides trying to get him to go back? "Alan, I support you in whatever you do, but it really is too dangerous here." As Laura finished speaking, she clapped her hands. From the corners of the room, several burly men in camouflage combat gear appeared out of nowhere. Each one was armed with a gun. "Alan, these are mercenaries I hired to protect your film crew." Alan stared in shock at the mercenaries who had suddenly appeared. An indescribable emotion welled up inside him. He thought Laura had come to convince him to go back. He never expected. Alan looked up and met her dark, teasing eyes. He could even see his own reflection clearly in them. Alan quickly looked away, unnaturally clearing his throat into his fist. "Let's go eat." He walked downstairs as if fleeing. Laura stood there, watching Alan's retreating back, a slight curve to her lips. She hurried after him. Alan, aren't you going to introduce us? Mr. Wong held up his glass, his suggestive gaze shifting back and forth between Laura and Alan. Alan glanced at Laura sitting beside him, noting her every move was filled with an air of nobility. Just as he was about to stand up, a slender hand rested on his thigh and patted it twice. Hello, everyone. I'm the one pursuing Alan. Sunlight streamed in through the broken window behind them. Alan sat next to Laura, but her presence seemed to envelop him completely. Watching Laura interact so naturally and gracefully with his colleagues, Alan couldn't help but think of Roxanne. In their first year of marriage, he had tried to bring Roxanne into his circle of friends. But Roxanne had just rolled her eyes at him dismissively. Are there any important people in your circle who can help me? Why would I want to meet ordinary people? I'm going to be a rising star photographer. Are they even worthy of meeting me? After that, Alan never brought it up in front of Roxanne again. But Laura was different from Roxanne. The family was one of the top elite families in the city, the epitome of wealth and power. Laura was a true heiress. Yet she was willing to humble herself and associate with so-called ordinary people. A shrimp suddenly appeared in his bowl. Alan looked over. Laura was still talking to Mr. Wong, but her hands never stopped moving, peeling one shrimp after another. All the shrimp meat ended up in his bowl. Alan felt something secretly stirring in his chest. Roxanne sat numbly on the floor, the phone beside her long dead. Her eyes stared blankly at the TV stand. Their wedding photo had been replaced by a picture of her and Frank. She had searched the entire villa and couldn't find a single photo of herself with Alan. Married for 3 whole years, and she didn't have a single picture with her own husband. Her heart felt like it was being twisted and torn. She bit back the tears, her eyes turning red. Her hands clenched into fists, the veins on her arms bulging. Roxanne grabbed a bottle of liquor and poured it straight down her throat. She choked a few times. Roxanne, what are you doing? Frank, wearing an apron, ran out of the kitchen. Seeing Roxanne in such a disheveled state, his voice broke into a sob. Get away. Roxanne shoved Frank's outstretched hand away, stumbled to her feet, and stared down at him. Was it you? Did you say something to Alan to make him leave me? She screamed at Frank with all her might. Frank propped himself up with his hands. His almond-shaped eyes filled with tears as he shrank back. He shook his head repeatedly. I didn't, Roxanne. Roxanne's eyes were hazy as she looked at Frank's tear-streaked face. She slowly crouched down to meet his gaze. She reached out tentatively and touched his face. Roxanne. Frank's body trembled as he tried to pull away, his eyes pleading. If it weren't for the money he was trying to get from Roxanne, would he have put up with this for so long? He grit his teeth, deliberately putting on a cautious expression. A sharp slap flew toward his face. Frank couldn't dodge it. The cheek that had just healed quickly swelled up again. Roxanne, what are you doing? Roxanne's father, leaning on the railing, slowly made his way down the stairs. After just a few steps, he was out of breath. Alan left on his own. How can you take your anger out on Frank? Roxanne's father glared at her furiously. If he hadn't said those things to Alan, Alan would never have left. I'm telling you, you'd better pray I can find Alan. Otherwise, I won't let you off the hook. With that, Roxanne turned and walked upstairs without looking back. She pushed open the door to Alan's room. The familiar scent of his body wash hung in the air. Roxanne looked around and sat down on the marble windowsill. Before she met Alan, she had already heard of his reputation. The new heartthrob of the photography department. The first time she saw him was on a rainy day. The pear blossoms of early spring were battered to the ground by the rain, their small white petals floating in the shallow puddles. He held an umbrella with his shoulder, pointing his camera at the pear blossoms. The moment the wind blew, Roxanne's heart was captured, especially after she learned that Alan's family was middle class. She was sick of the insecurity that came from her own family's poverty. Throughout college, she was at Alan's beck and call, a fact known to the entire school. By the time they graduated, Alan finally agreed to be with her. But the more time she spent with him, the more Roxanne understood that her pride prevented her from truly facing her feelings. She buried her face in her hands. She hadn't even given Alan a proper wedding. At that thought, Roxanne immediately looked up, pulled out her phone, and called the wedding planning company she had contacted before. When she found Alan, she was willing to apologize, willing to start over. She would give Alan the grandest wedding of the century. The streets were almost buried in dust. The ruined walls were riddled with bullet holes from the fierce fighting. The vehicle drove along the bumpy road. Alan, with a scarf wrapped around his face, leaned drowsily against the car window. His brows were slightly furrowed. The car was silent. "We'll evacuate to the safe zone first, then figure out how to continue shooting. Once we're safe, things will be better." After an unknown amount of time, Mr. Wong, in the driver's seat, let out a deep sigh, his voice heavy with gloom and suppression. Alan didn't respond. He turned to look out the window. The swirling sand seemed to be burying the entire city. A hand suddenly reached out and blocked his view. Laura's low, hoarse voice was uncharacteristically devoid of its usual playfulness. "Don't look." In her palm, Laura could clearly feel his eyelashes like two fine brushes, tickling her skin. Darkness fell before his eyes. Alan suddenly recalled the previous night. The air raid came without warning. By the time Alan snapped out of it, explosions were already sounding in the distance. He didn't even have time to pack, just grabbed his backpack with his ID and his camera and ran. For the first time, Alan felt so close to death. People were fleeing everywhere. He was pushed forward by the crowd. Just as he was about to fall, Laura pulled him into a tight embrace. She shielded him as they got into the car Mr. Wong was driving. The car drove all night. The sound of bombing echoed in their ears all night long. No one dared to close their eyes. "If you're tired, you can lean on me." Laura carefully guided his head to rest on her shoulder. She glanced at her slightly protruding belly, her hand by her side clenching. This kind of protection was far from enough. By the time they reached the safe zone, it was the next afternoon. Everyone was exhausted after a sleepless night. Alan got out of the car with Laura's help and looked back at the congested traffic. A child holding the famous Damascus roses weaved through the streets, tirelessly selling them to passers-by. Alan's fingers twitched. He raised his camera and captured the scene. In this city, there were still people tirelessly striving to live. "Alan, do you want to get back into photography?" Laura watched him press the shutter, a hint of confusion in her voice. Alan looked down at the photo. At her words, Roxanne's face involuntarily flashed in his mind. In an instant, he snapped back to reality. "I just want to use these photos to prove to them what real photography is." Laura's narrow, deep eyes were fixed on Alan's profile. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest. Alan's gaze lifted from the camera, meeting Laura's focused, admiring, and completely undisguised look. After returning to their room in the safe zone, Laura immediately arranged for someone to enter Alan into a competition, then submitted the series of works he had taken along the way. After everything was done, she stared at the phone in her palm, a faint smile on her lips. Alan was still the same Alan. The city was constantly being destroyed, only to be reborn from the ruins. Mr. Wong didn't restrict Alan's movements, letting him wander and shoot material for the documentary. Laura followed him diligently, showing no trace of an heiress's pampered nature. Alan would turn to look at her from time to time, a secret bud sprouting in his heart, slowly prying open the cracks. Frank hadn't seen Roxanne at the villa for several days. But every night, the light in what used to be Alan's room would be on, casting a warm orange glow. He wore a cream-colored shirt, his black hair neatly styled, and sat quietly at the dining table. As the sky gradually darkened, Roxanne returned, dragging her weary body home. When she caught sight of the familiar figure at the table, the briefcase in her hand fell to the floor with a thud. "Alan, you're back?" A woman's excited voice came from behind him. Frank's hands, resting on his knees, clenched into tight fists. He struggled to keep his expression from cracking. With tears in his eyes, he bit his lip and turned around, saying pitifully, "Roxanne, it's me, Frank." The excitement on Roxanne's face vanished the moment Frank turned. She returned to her usual coldness, a hint of impatience in her brow. Why are you dressed like that? Go to bed. Roxanne rubbed her temples and sat down on the sofa. Roxanne, you haven't had dinner with me in a long time. Frank pouted and put his arm around Roxanne's, feigning grievance. To his surprise, Roxanne pulled her arm away and glanced at him. I don't have time to eat with you. I'm busy preparing for my wedding with Alan. Frank's face instantly darkened. A wedding? Did she really think Alan was coming back? Roxanne was planning a wedding with Alan? Roxanne, he ruined my wedding. How can you still throw one for him? Frank slammed his hand on the table and stood up, furious. But when he met Roxanne's icy eyes, his anger vanished completely. Roxanne stared at his face, her lips curling in disdain as she looked him up and down. Frank, don't think I don't know why you got close to me. I'm telling you, you'd better behave yourself, otherwise. Frank understood her unspoken warning. An uncontrollable shiver ran through him. He grit his teeth, watching Roxanne's retreating back as she turned to leave, and snorted. What, you think if you give him a wedding of the century, Alan will forgive you? I'm telling you, that's impossible. Since Roxanne already knew his motives, there was no need to pretend anymore. He might as well go all in. Roxanne, on the stairs, stopped and turned her head sharply. Her dark, deep eyes were like a bottomless pit. A cold chill emanated from them. Roxanne, any man would find what you did unforgivable. Alan marrying you? Ha! In your dreams. Frank straightened his back, forcing himself to meet Roxanne's gaze. After he finished speaking, he turned and hurried upstairs, leaving only his back for Roxanne to see. Roxanne remained standing there, a ringing in her ears. Her mind was a mess, Frank's words replaying over and over. She clutched her head and crouched down in pain. It was as if she could see Alan's tear-streaked face before her, questioning why she had done it. Her eyes instantly turned red, tears welling up. Her heart felt like it was covered in sharp thorns. Every time she thought of Alan, it was as if her heart was being rolled over the spikes. A dense, sharp pain. Roxanne couldn't bear to think about what she had done to Alan over the past 3 years of their marriage. She felt like a fish gasping for air on the verge of death, kneeling on the floor, taking deep, desperate breaths. A faded photo booth picture fell out of her suit pocket. The man in the photo was smiling brightly, youthful and bold. Suddenly, a teardrop landed heavily on the photo, then another and another. It was the first time Alan had seen Laura take 18 calls in one morning. I already said, I'm not going back. My assistant is handling the company for now. Laura clutched her phone, idly kicking a pebble at her feet, a hint of impatience in her brow. I know it's not as serious as you think. Hearing her tone, Alan could vaguely guess who was on the other end of the line. He stood up and dusted off his pants. Laura had been by his side for so long that he had complacently forgotten her identity. The heir to the family of D-City. She had abandoned everything there to accompany him to this dangerous place. Alan knew exactly who she was doing it for. He looked down at the camera in his hands and aimed the lens at the woman talking on the phone. With a soft click of the shutter, Laura finally ended the call. She smiled and returned to Alan's side, teasing Alan, "Were you just taking my picture?" Alan glanced at her. Laura's captivating face struck the tender bud that was quietly blooming in his heart. Your family is pressuring you. You should go back. He gently closed the lens cap, not looking at Laura. He only felt the temperature beside him suddenly drop. Alan. Laura's voice was hoarse, her tone carrying a certain seriousness. I'm staying here willingly. You don't want to see me? No. His mouth moved faster than his brain. By the time Alan realized it, the word was already out. His heart pounded in his chest. Alan had to admit, when he heard Laura say that, he felt a moment of reluctance and heartache. Laura saw his expression and understood immediately. She grabbed Alan's hand, her face beaming. Alan, are you? Before she could finish, a loud explosion sounded in the distance. Flames spread from afar. Cries and calls for help reached Alan's ears almost simultaneously. Alan's eyes widened. Forgetting everything else, He scooped Laura up in his arms and ran. Fighter jets had appeared overhead at some point. The oppressive roar was almost suffocating. Alan took her to hide in a ruin. The bombing continued, one explosion after another. The entire city was engulfed in flames. Alan knew the city would fall, but he hadn't expected it to happen so quickly. A sharp, loud cry broke Alan's thoughts. He looked in the direction of the cry. A little girl, about 2 or 3 years old, was sitting in the middle of the flames. Alan's pupils constricted. Without thinking, he was about to get up, but the figure beside him moved first. She brought the little girl back. The small body trembled in Laura's arms. She whimpered for her mother, scared and timid. Alan looked at her, his heart almost melting. As night fell, the bombing overhead finally stopped. The little girl was curled up in a corner, sleeping peacefully. Alan held Laura, her slender hand slowly stroking her gradually swelling belly. "Alan, what do you think? A girl or a boy?" Alan hadn't thought about it. He felt that either would be fine. He had been married to Roxanne for 3 years. In the second year, they had started trying for a baby. But nothing ever happened. Roxanne never said anything, but she would often stare at him with cold eyes. Thinking back now, it was probably around that time. Roxanne had already begun to despise him. Alan's lips curled in contempt. He had seen right through Roxanne. Either is fine. In a daze, he heard Laura speak. "I'd like a son who's just like you." Roxanne had a dream. In the dream, she and Alan weren't together. They were strangers. At the end of the dream, Alan looked back. His familiar eyes filled with a coldness she couldn't understand. "Do you think I would forgive you for what you've done?" She woke up in a cold sweat. She realized she had fallen asleep on Alan's bed at some point. The scent of Alan in the air was getting fainter, so faint that Roxanne could barely smell it anymore. This made her inexplicably anxious. "Housekeeper! Housekeeper!" The housekeeper hurried over. "Miss, what are your orders? Where's Alan? What kind of cologne did he use before?" Roxanne tried to suppress the panic in her heart. She couldn't find Alan. All she could do was quietly prepare the wedding of the century that Alan wanted. When Alan returned, they would get married. She could wait, but she couldn't lose this scent. It was her only anchor. The housekeeper looked troubled, but said respectfully, Mr. G never used cologne." Roxanne froze. Alan didn't use cologne? Then what was the scent she had been smelling all this time? The housekeeper seemed to guess her thoughts and explained hesitantly, "Miss, I've read about something called pheromones. When two people are in love, their bodies secrete a unique scent that only they can smell. Pheromones." Roxanne suddenly understood. She had read about it before, something about it being a choice made by their genes. So, her genes, had they always been steadfastly choosing Alan? Roxanne felt as if something in her chest had shattered. A cold wind blew relentlessly through the cracks. An emotion called regret grew like a wild vine, wrapping tightly around Roxanne's heart. Go find him. Search every place Alan could possibly be. Roxanne leaned on the edge of the bed and shouted. The housekeeper, seeing this, didn't dare say anything more and quickly left. She couldn't help but sigh. Someone who truly wants to hide from you can't be found so easily. Frank, hiding in the shadows, had witnessed everything. His fists at his sides were clenched so tightly they creaked. Genetic selection? Love? What a joke. None of those 3 words applied to Alan and Roxanne. Roxanne wanted to find Alan and make up? Impossible. Frank turned and went downstairs. Roxanne's father was sitting on the garden swing, rocking and basking in the sun. He stood at a distance, staring at the old man's back, a hint of malice in his eyes. Before Frank could make a move, Roxanne's father got up from the swing and walked toward him. "Frank, what are you doing out here so early?" Roxanne's father looked at Frank with confusion. Frank secretly pinched his own thigh, and tears instantly welled up in his eyes. He spoke with a pitiful tone. "Uncle, Roxanne only has eyes for that Alan. This morning, I heard her telling someone to go find him. Roxanne doesn't like me at all. I should just leave." Roxanne's father was instantly furious. He took Frank's hand and patted it comfortingly. "Don't worry. I will never let Alan ruin things between you and Roxanne. Frank let him drag him in front of Roxanne. Roxanne's father slapped her hard across the face. You are getting a marriage license with Frank today. Roxanne's dark gaze fell on Frank. Her lips curled into a sneer. Get married? Sure. You can marry him. Before either of them could react, Roxanne strode out, her figure disappearing around the corner. After a wave of air raids ended, Alan and Laura finally set out for the safe zone. The dusty air was thick with the smell of blood, which wafted relentlessly into their noses. Alan held the little girl in one arm and Laura's hand tightly with the other. Mr. Wong and his team hadn't gone far, waiting for them just at the edge of the safe zone. The moment he saw Alan and Laura, Mr. Wong let out a sigh of relief. Alan, are you two okay? Alan's handsome face was pale. He managed to raise a hand and wave, too exhausted to speak. Alan, I just got a message from the network. They want you to go back for an awards ceremony. Mr. Wong helped Alan to a bench and handed him an open bottle of water. Awards? What awards? His dry throat was finally soothed. Alan was confused. Then, as if remembering something, he looked over at Laura. I think one of your submissions won an award. Let me know when you want to go back, and I'll book your ticket. Alan listened to Mr. Wong, looked down at his dust-covered hands, and patted them clean. Whenever, Mr. Wong smiled and patted his shoulder. I heard from the network that you won an international photography award this time. Your dream has finally come true. Alan's eyelids fluttered, but he didn't respond, carefully dusting off his hands. He and Mr. Wong had known each other since he first started. Winning an international photography award had been his dream since college. But after marrying Roxanne, that dream had been tossed aside. His entire world seemed to revolve around her. Now, someone had submitted his work for him, helping him achieve his dream, allowing him to shine in the field he loved. Alan had to admit, the tender sprout he had deliberately ignored in his heart had now grown into a towering tree, occupying his entire being. His eyelids trembled, and a tear fell onto his palm. Why are you crying? Alan looked up and saw the usually regal and flamboyant Miss Brooke, now covered in dust, staring at him. Her deep, narrow eyes were filled with unconcealed worry. Alan couldn't hold back anymore. He lunged forward and hugged Laura, burying his head in her shoulder. Before Laura could speak, she felt a dampness spreading on her shoulder. The wind blew fine sand against them. Laura stood still. After a while, she heard Alan's muffled voice. Laura, thank you. Laura blinked, a playful smile on her lips. If you really want to thank me, how about you marry me? Okay. Alan pulled away from her embrace and met Laura's clearly surprised eyes, a gentle curve to his lips. Alan, what did you just say? Laura raised a hand and rubbed her eyes in disbelief. What? Does the great Miss Brooke stutter sometimes? Alan's eyes were slightly red, but they were filled with a star-like smile. A pair of slender hands pulled him into a fierce hug. This is wonderful, Alan. You finally said yes. 7 years. Her long wait had finally paid off. Laura couldn't contain her excitement. It was only when Alan subconsciously called her name that she snapped back to her senses. She was so happy she almost forgot she was pregnant. Laura, I have to go back for the awards ceremony. I'll go with you. Laura held him carefully, suppressing the excitement in her heart. The news of Alan's award spread throughout the photography community in D-City. It quickly became a trending topic on social media. When Frank opened his phone that morning, it was flooded with posts about Alan. He stared at the handsome face on the screen, gritting his teeth. Why? Why did Alan get to have it so good? Why did he get to win an award? His nails dug deep into his palms. He seemed not to feel the pain. His trembling fingers opened the comments section, where praise was unanimous. I remember him, wasn't he the male photographer involved in that plagiarism scandal before? This is real talent. Watch out for certain people trying to stir up rumors again. The only male photographer to have a nude photo exhibition? Interesting. Frank keenly caught the familiar words, and his clenched fist relaxed. How could he have forgotten Roxanne? Wasn't she searching for Alan all over the world? He wanted to see how Roxanne would react when she found out about Alan's award. Would she still chase after him? Wasn't it because Roxanne felt too proud in front of Alan that she turned to him in the first place? Frank took a screenshot of the social media post and forwarded it to Roxanne. Roxanne, look, Alan actually won an award. With 2 soft dings from his phone, Roxanne's gaze shifted from the wedding dress for a moment. She instinctively pulled out her phone and saw the face she had been longing for. Alan. The moment she read the message, the smile on Roxanne's face vanished. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Alan had won a major international photography award. Roxanne's fingertips trembled slightly. A long-forgotten sense of defeat crept up from a hidden corner of her mind. Back in college, Alan had already shown his talent for photography. He won award after award in various competitions. His talent was more famous than his looks. Roxanne was proud of him on one hand, but on the other, she felt a sense of crisis, of being surpassed by him. She always felt that she could never fully control him. This feeling of needing control had plagued her throughout her college years. In the 3 years she was with Alan, she knew people behind her back said she got where she was by kissing up, that she was Alan's simp. The constant sense of crisis vanished after she married him. Alan had to balance work and family, and no longer had time for photography competitions. His fame in the circle gradually faded. Although she became famous because of Alan, still, she and Alan were husband and wife. These small things were what Alan should have done. Her fame and fortune were good for their little family. She turned off the screen and sighed. After she and Alan remarried, she definitely wouldn't let him participate in any more so-called competitions. Roxanne had it all planned out. She was going to have a child with Alan, to tie him firmly to her side. Just this once. She would tolerate it this once. Roxanne rubbed her temples, then suddenly remembered something and quickly opened her phone. How could she forget? Even though it was an international award, the ceremony would definitely be held in the country. Roxanne excitedly clicked on the trending topic. The location of the ceremony was listed at the bottom right. The ceremony was tomorrow, and the TV station would also hold a press conference. Roxanne clenched her fists. Tomorrow. Tomorrow she could see Alan. Roxanne looked back at the suit sparkling in the display window. She lifted her chin. Pack that one up for me. She couldn't help but imagine the look on Alan's face when he saw the suit. He would probably be moved to tears, right? The day the plane landed in D-City, the entire city was shrouded in smog. A crowd of reporters who had gotten wind of the news had gathered at the arrival's gate, craning their necks and holding their cameras, watching the exit. Alan leaned against Laura, glanced at the jam-packed exit, and followed her to the VIP channel. Alan carefully sat down in the back seat. The person in the passenger seat turned around and gave him a thorough look. Then he smiled. I see that girl of mine finally found me a son-in-law. Laura, who had just gotten in the car, froze when she saw the man in the passenger seat. She frowned unhappily. Dad, what are you doing here? Hey, is that how you talk to your father? The woman in the driver's seat also turned around and shot Laura a glare. Alan, these are my parents. Mom, Dad, this is Alan, my husband. Hearing Laura's last word, Alan's handsome face instantly turned bright red. Hello, sir, ma'am. Thank you for coming to pick us up. Laura's father waved his hand dismissively, his face disapproving. What's this, sir, business? I've heard all about you and Laura. Good kid. From now on, we're family. Alan looked up, stunned for a moment, then turned to look at Laura beside him. His eyes unconsciously reddened. Ever since his parents passed away, he hadn't heard anyone say that they were a family. Alan's voice was slightly choked, and 2 shallow dimples appeared on his handsome face. Okay. A warm current seemed to flow through his heart, spreading from his core throughout his body. Mom, Dad, can you take us to the press conference first? Laura looked at Alan with a hint of sympathy and tucked a stray strand of hair behind his ear. Then I'll wait for you outside the venue. We can go straight home afterward so you can rest. What surprised Alan was that Laura's parents didn't have the arrogance of elite families. On the contrary, they were very approachable. All right, thanks, Mom and Dad. The car arrived at the press conference venue. Many media outlets were standing outside, clearly there for the awards ceremony. After all, he was the first photographer in the country to win an international photography award. Everyone wanted to see him in person. Do you think what they're saying online is true? What? About Alan's wife selling his nude photos for money. Probably true. I saw someone on my feed who went to that exhibition. Hearing the chattering media, he subconsciously paused. His grip on Laura's hand tightened. Even after so long, hearing about it still made his heart clench. It seemed that no matter what he achieved, what awards he won, he could never escape the reputation of that nude photo exhibition. It would always be attached to him. Which media outlet are you from? Alan heard the woman beside him ask in a low, displeased voice. He looked up. The reporter recognized Laura immediately and stammered out the name of his company. D-City doesn't need your little outlet. Get lost. With Laura's words, the downfall of this media company was practically sealed. The reporter's face turned deathly pale. He stared blankly at Laura's retreating back.
Alan.
Just as they took a few steps, a voice all too familiar to Alan called out from behind. He stiffened, his back instantly straightening. Alan's grip on Laura's hand tightened. Let's go. He ignored the approaching footsteps, continuing to walk forward, not noticing that Laura hadn't followed him. Seeing Alan head backstage, Laura turned and blocked Roxanne's path. She lazily lifted her eyelids to glance at Roxanne. What do you want? Roxanne was initially annoyed at being stopped, but when she saw it was Laura, she quickly composed herself. Laura, I'm here to see Alan. She expertly pulled a cigarette from her pocket to offer her. But Laura didn't even look at it. She scanned Roxanne from head to toe and snorted. You and Alan are done. Don't you get it? A fierce look flashed in her deep eyes, making Roxanne tremble. She suddenly realized. It was you. You tampered with my and Alan's marriage certificate. Laura glanced up carelessly. It was me. So what? You. What right do you have to interfere in my business with Alan? Roxanne was furious, her fists clenched at her sides, her face flushed red. The surrounding media sensed a juicy story and expertly raised their cameras. Before they could start shooting, Laura shot them a cold, sharp glare. Everyone couldn't help but shudder. They almost forgot. This was the heir to the Brooke family. With a flick of her finger, she could make a small media outlet disappear from D-City. You'd have to be crazy to go against the Brooke family. What right? Laura put her hands in her pockets, her eyebrows raised provocatively. The oppressive aura of a superior radiated from her, and Roxanne subconsciously shrank back. Realizing what she had done, she tried to cover it up by straightening her back. Laura took in her every move and sneered. The right of having loved him for 7 years. Did you really think I'd let him marry someone like you? With that, Laura couldn't be bothered with Roxanne anymore and turned to head backstage. Roxanne stood frozen. Laura had loved Alan for 7 years. 4 years of college, 3 years of their marriage. Exactly 7 years. When she snapped back to reality, Laura was gone. She stormed into the venue. She was going to tell Alan everything Laura had done. Even if the marriage certificate was fake, Alan might not know. So what if she had loved him for 7 years? She and Alan at least had 3 years of marriage between them. One day as husband and wife means 100 days of grace. Alan would definitely believe her. Alan walked onto the stage in a light gray suit. Laura stood by his side, her slender hand resting gently on the small of his back. The crowd watched in surprise, a new level of respect entering their attitude toward the press conference. Roxanne sat in the audience. Seeing their intimate behavior, she could no longer control herself. She stood up and shouted, Alan, do you know what she's done? The previously silent venue was instantly filled with the sound of camera shutters. Alan followed the voice and saw Roxanne in the crowd. His brows furrowed. Whatever Laura did has nothing to do with you, does it? Do you know? She, with my and your marriage certificate. Before Roxanne could finish, she was dragged out of the venue by security. Marriage certificate? Alan's face was tense, his lips pressed into a thin line. The station director cleared his throat. Next, we will officially begin the awards ceremony. If there is any news unrelated to the awards today. Laura shot a cold glance at her assistant, who had just rushed over. The assistant nodded hastily. Alan hadn't expected Roxanne to slip backstage. He crossed his arms, his brows furrowed in displeasure. What do you want? Roxanne smoothed out her wrinkled suit. Alan, I was wrong about what happened before. But you also ruined my and Frank's wedding. So, can we? Before she could finish, Alan cut her off with a raised hand. He heard his own cold, emotionless voice say, Roxanne, I will never get back together with you. Hearing his firm tone, a nameless anger flared up in Roxanne. She grabbed Alan's wrist. Not get back with me? Then who do you want to be with? That Laura? A sharp pain shot up his wrist. Alan bit his lip and forcefully shook her off, stumbling back a few steps. He instinctively reached out to protect Laura's stomach. Who I'm with is none of your business. Alan glared at Roxanne. 3 years together, and he had never realized she was this kind of person. She's pregnant? Roxanne noticed his subtle movement, and the anger on her face cracked. She looked in disbelief at the slight bulge under Laura's loose dress. Whose is it? Could it be Alan's? You've been messing around with Laura for that long. Were you planning to leave me all along? Alan, seeing the situation, decided to stop hiding it. He held his hands protectively over Laura's stomach, his heart pounding in his chest. His anxiety grew. Hearing Roxanne's words, he froze for a moment, then let out a contemptuous laugh. He looked up at Roxanne and said, word for word, Roxanne, do you need me to remind you who it was every night for the past 3 years? At his words, Roxanne's anger was instantly replaced by panic. She rushed forward, trying to grab Alan's hand, but he smoothly avoided her. Alan, I can explain. I was just scared of being poor. I didn't want you to suffer with me. Poor? Suffer? Alan almost wanted to laugh. From the beginning of their relationship, he had paid for everything. Even when Roxanne had her own money, she never spent it on him. He had always thought it was because her family was poor and she felt insecure. He was willing to give more, it didn't matter. Until Alan found out he was just $1 million a night in Frank's words. And that so-called $1 million, Alan hadn't seen a single cent of it. He lowered his eyelids, a dark, unreadable expression in his eyes. After all this time, Roxanne was still as selfish as ever. Alan, can we get back together? I swear I'll never treat you like that again. This baby, as long as you make her get rid of it, I can let bygones be bygones. Let bygones be bygones? Since when was it her place to say that? Alan looked up again, his cold eyes devoid of any warmth. Looking into them, one would feel a chill to the bone. Before he could speak, he heard hurried footsteps behind him. Then, Alan was pulled into a familiar, warm embrace. He instinctively relaxed his tense back and leaned into Laura. Are you okay, Alan? Alan's eyes were red. He shook his head slightly at her. Laura, you don't steal a friend's husband. You slept with my husband behind my back. Are you even human? Roxanne watched their intimate posture, gritting her teeth. Laura shot her a sharp glare. Friend? You think you're worthy of being my friend? Laura looked down and adjusted Alan's slip jacket, then lazily looked up. Husband? Your marriage to Alan doesn't seem to be legally binding, does it? Roxanne's eyes were bloodshot. She lunged forward, but before she could even touch Laura's clothes, she was stopped by a bodyguard. I knew it was you. Alan, do you know she faked our marriage certificate behind our backs? She screamed at Alan with all her might. Laura's heart skipped a beat. She instinctively looked at Alan. The man in her arms seemed to flinch. The air was silent for a moment. Roxanne, seeing this, smiled triumphantly. Alan, we were married for 3 years. I promise, if you make this woman get rid of that bastard child, I'll treat you well from now on. We can go back to how things were before. Alan, leaning against Laura, stood up straight, his gaze fixed on Roxanne. One hand on Laura's stomach, he walked slowly and firmly toward Roxanne. Laura instinctively wanted to reach out, a flash of loneliness in her eyes. Could it be? Was Alan just lying to her? Roxanne watched Alan walk toward her, crossed her arms, and tilted her chin provocatively at Laura. I told you, you could never compare to the 3 years of history Alan and I have. Roxanne's words were cut off by a sharp slap. The stinging pain reminded Roxanne that Alan had slapped her. She pressed her tongue against her cheek and looked back menacingly. But she only saw Alan's eyes slightly narrowed. Before, Roxanne, I just have to accept that I was blind to ever fall for you. His voice was light, but it hit Roxanne hard, stirring up the insecurity in her hidden corners. Roxanne, I'll say this one last time. I will never get back together with you, and I really have to thank Laura for helping me out so much from the very beginning. Alan shot her a cold glance. Just as he was about to turn, Laura stepped forward, her hand on his shoulder trembling slightly. Her deep, dark eyes were filled with suppressed excitement. Alan, how could you say that to Roxanne? Frank appeared out of nowhere, grabbing Roxanne's arm and speaking indignantly. Roxanne, I heard everything you guys said just now. Alan, I know you're upset about me and Roxanne's fake marriage, but you don't have to deliberately provoke her. He was eager to see Roxanne and Alan break up, but he never expected their marriage certificate to be fake. No wonder Roxanne had been so out of it after they went to the police station that night. Thinking of the unsold villa, a glint flashed in Frank's eyes, and his grip on Roxanne tightened. Alan, I know you're angry with me. It's okay. I've prepared a wedding of the century for you. I'm sorry I didn't have the money before. Roxanne shook off Frank's hand, not even sparing a glance at him as he fell to the ground. She turned to Alan, her tone becoming humble. Alan, I've always loved you. I was just insecure and afraid to face my feelings for you. Alan's gaze fell to the simple band on his finger. The year they got married, he had begged Roxanne for a long time before she finally agreed to buy the cheapest silver ring to appease him. And yet, Alan had worn it for 3 years. A cold smile touched his lips. He took off the ring and threw it hard at Roxanne. The silver band rolled on the floor with a clatter. The expression on Roxanne's face froze, her eyes fixed on the simple ring. Alan looked at her, his eyes filled with disappointment. He hadn't expected Roxanne to be the same old Roxanne, selfish to the core. He said nothing, just took Laura's hand and said softly, "Let's go."
Alan.
You'd better not regret this. Roxanne glared at their retreating backs and kicked the ring that had landed nearby. Roxanne, don't be angry. Maybe Alan is just really mad this time. Why don't you take him to the wedding venue you set up? Maybe he'll have a change of heart. Frank picked up the ring Roxanne had kicked, a look of contempt in his eyes. He could tell at a glance that it was the cheapest silver ring on the market a few years ago. It was a wonder Alan had treasured it for so many years. Frank's few words soothed Roxanne's anger. She clapped her hands. Right, Alan won't forgive me because he hasn't seen my sincerity yet. Frank, could you have someone keep an eye on Alan for me? After giving her instructions, Roxanne ran off without another thought. When they were first dating, Alan had told her about his dream wedding. A lawn, flowers, a ceremony, pure white, handsome suit. She would make up for all of it. She owed it to him. After all, Alan had worked so hard for her for so long. Frank stood there, watching Roxanne's retreating back, his handsome face icy cold. He looked down at the ring in his palm. Then he turned and threw it mercilessly into the trash. He wanted money. His eyes narrowed, a dark, unreadable expression in them. The moment Laura got in the car, she hugged Alan tightly and wouldn't let go, like a cuddly cat wanting to stick to him. Laura's mother glanced in the rearview mirror and said disapprovingly, "Laura, what's gotten into you?" Laura looked up from Alan's arms, her wet, brown eyes blinking at him. She took Alan's hand and placed it on her own cheek, her voice full of dejection. "I thought you didn't want me anymore." Alan felt the warmth of her skin under his palm and the subtle glances from Laura's parents. He quickly pulled his hand back. He looked out the window, avoiding her gaze. "I don't." But Laura wouldn't let him go. She chased after him, burying her head in his shoulder and mumbling, "Alan, don't leave me." Alan's back was ramrod straight. He shot Laura a look, and seeing her genuine sadness, he sighed and gently stroked her soft hair. "Okay, I promise." Laura's parents exchanged a silent look. They never expected their child to have this side to her. Alan's gaze fell on the faint mark left by the ring on his finger, his eyes distant. Noticing his gaze, Laura made a circle with her fingers and placed it on Alan's. Her low voice was like a precious cello, magnetic and enchanting. "Alan, I will give you a ring that belongs to us." From the very beginning, Laura had noticed. The only one wearing a so-called wedding ring was Alan. The moment he stepped into the Brooke family home, Alan finally understood what it meant to be a top elite family in D-City. The garden alone was the size of the White family's entire villa. Laura's mother slowly entered the main hall. "Alan, from now on, think of this as your home." The magnificent decor had a feel of last-century Europe. Alan was at a loss for a moment. He nodded blankly. "Mom, Alan and I are going to rest. We can talk tonight." Laura handed her luggage to the housekeeper, who came to greet them and walked toward Alan. She ignored her mother's annoyed look. "Alan, let's get our marriage license tomorrow." Inside the elevator, with only the two of them, Laura intertwined her fingers with his without restraint, her voice full of a playful coyness. Alan looked down, lost in thought. Only when they entered the room did he finally speak, his voice serious. "Laura, let me think about it. Between us." Before he could finish, Laura turned, closed the door, and leaned against it, one hand propped up. She had him completely trapped. They were so close that Alan could clearly see his own reflection in her eyes.
Alan?
Her hot breath fanned across his neck. He was forced to tilt his head up. The veins on his strong neck were a faint blue. Laura's eyes darkened for a moment, and she gently bit his skin. A light tooth mark instantly appeared. "Alan, I've waited too long. I know what you're worried about. Whatever you want to do, I respect your decision." She tucked a stray strand of hair behind his ear, the hair curling around her fingertip. Alan belatedly realized that the Laura before him was not the obedient girl he had thought. She had just been holding back in front of him. "Alan, actually, if I wanted to, I could have us legally married today, not even tomorrow, without you ever knowing." Laura's voice was laced with a teasing, lazy tone. Alan was leaning against the cold door. A slender hand suddenly wrapped around his waist, pulling him forward. A familiar, hot breath washed over him. Alan was surprised to find that he instinctively wanted to move closer to Laura. He knew Laura was right. The Brooke family was powerful and influential, and being born into such a family, Laura could get anything she wanted. She was born to be adored. He also understood that his parents-in-law's attitude toward him depended entirely on Laura's attitude toward him. Alan lowered his gaze slightly, his lashes casting a shadow on his eyelids. He was still wearing the slightly oversized suit, his figure tall and straight. Laura stared at him for a long time, then sighed. "I don't know what to do with you, Alan. Go get some rest." Alan lifted his face, his brows slightly furrowed in displeasure. "Laura, is this how you propose?" Laura froze for a moment, then a burst of joy erupted in her narrow eyes. She reached out and pinched Alan's cheek. "Okay, I'll plan a proper one. Now go change and rest. I'll call you for dinner." Alan nodded slightly and went into the bathroom. Laura didn't leave. She had the housekeeper bring a few loose, comfortable outfits and sat in the room, staring at a message from her assistant. Her lips curled in contempt. That Roxanne still hadn't given up. Alan sat on a bench in the hospital, clutching the prenatal report the doctor had just given him, accompanying Laura, his eyes full of earnestness. Frank hid around a corner in the hospital. After waiting for several days, he had finally caught Alan alone. He secretly took a picture of Alan and sent the location to Roxanne. What Frank hadn't expected was that Roxanne would arrive even faster than he thought. The obstetrics and gynecology department was bustling with pregnant women and couples. Alan sat quietly with Laura on the bench, his dark hair neatly styled. A gentle smile played on his handsome face. When he looked up, his deep, starry eyes seemed to peer into your soul. A soft glow emanated from him as he carefully attended to Laura beside him. Roxanne, who had rushed over, saw this scene, and her heart suddenly trembled. How could she forget? Since college, Alan had always been so gentle. Roxanne quickly walked toward Alan, crouched down in front of him, and softened her voice. Alan? When Alan saw the face in front of him, the smile on his lips vanished instantly, his pupils constricting. What are you doing here? A slender hand grabbed his arm, pulling him up without any gentleness. Alan, didn't you want a wedding? I prepared one. Let me take you to see it. Roxanne smiled, but there was no warmth in her eyes. Her grip on Alan's arm tightened. He suddenly remembered that Laura had gone to the restroom today, leaving him alone. His phone was in her crossbody bag. Alan could only struggle to keep up with Roxanne's pace. Roxanne practically threw him into the car. His back slammed against the seat. Without thinking, Alan instinctively protected Laura's bag. He grabbed the seatbelt and fastened it, scooting toward the window. He quietly took out his phone from the bag. Roxanne walked around the car and got into the driver's seat. She looked at Alan with loving eyes. The moment she reached out, she saw him instinctively flinch, a fierce look flashing in her own eyes. Alan, didn't you want a wedding just for the two of us? Roxanne chattered on, completely ignoring Alan's feelings. The car sped up, heading toward the suburbs. Alan's heart was in his throat. He wasn't sure what Roxanne would do. He pressed the power button on his phone 3 times hard. Glancing at the screen that had dialed an emergency contact, Alan coughed twice. Roxanne, where is this wedding you're talking about? Roxanne turned to look at Alan. Just as he thought she had figured something out, she unconsciously smiled. Alan, didn't you say you liked lawns? The White family villa has a lawn. Alan looked closely. This wasn't the way to the White family villa. I ordered a suit for you. You'll definitely love it. Roxanne's voice was sinister, as if laced with knives. Alan didn't answer, just turned his head to look at the passing scenery outside the window. The car stopped in front of the bridal shop, the same one Frank had been to before. Alan couldn't help but ask, where did you get the money to buy a suit? Roxanne put one hand in her pocket and met his suspicious gaze. I sell Frank's photos on the international market. It's quite profitable. Now it was Alan's turn to be completely stunned. Photos? What other kind of photos could they be? The thought made him feel sick. He pushed Roxanne away, bent over and retched, but nothing came up. Alan wiped his mouth and glared at Roxanne. Roxanne, you're still as disgusting as ever. Roxanne stood there and shrugged nonchalantly. Alan, you're just too kind. I have to eat, you know. Alan tried to leave, but Roxanne grabbed his shoulder. Since you're here, you might as well take a look. They stepped into the bridal shop. Alan could only hope that Laura had received his call. He didn't notice a figure hiding behind a car outside the shop. Frank's hands trembled as he opened the foreign website. When he saw Roxanne's page filled with his own photos, he couldn't stop the tears from flowing. He never thought Roxanne would use the same tactic on him. Frank bit his lip hard, his sharp nails digging deep into his palms. His eyes were full of hatred as he stared at the woman through the glass window. Roxanne. He should have known, but he always thought he was the exception. Frank's gaze swept over and saw Laura in a dark gray sweatsuit. Without her usual playful and teasing demeanor, he didn't recognize her at first. She straightened the newspaper in her hand and walked toward the two at the entrance.
Alan.
The familiar, sultry voice was like a savior to Alan. He looked up and saw Laura standing not far behind the salesperson. Before he could move, the grip on his shoulder tightened. Laura's eyes narrowed at Roxanne's action, a flash of ruthlessness in them. Let him go. Let who go? Miss Brooke, I'm holding my own husband. Is there a problem? Roxanne's smile was sinister, as if daring her to do something. Laura stared at her smug face and clicked her tongue impatiently. Without giving Roxanne any time to react, the hand on Alan's shoulder was forcefully pulled away. Alan, are you okay? Laura, you're just a little rich. What's so great about that? Roxanne's face turned pale with pain, but she still grit her teeth and spoke fiercely. Laura, I dare you to let me go. A fist flew toward Roxanne, whistling through the air. Frank, standing outside the bridal shop, watched as Roxanne was beaten into a ball on the floor. His hands at his sides clenched tighter. A bodyguard lifted Roxanne and threw her out the door. She rolled on the ground a few times. Both her hands were useless, her face swollen like a pig's. Frank wiped his tears and ran over, his face full of concern. Roxanne, what happened to you? Weren't you with Alan? I'll take you to the hospital first. Roxanne barely glanced at Frank before passing out completely. Frank looked down at Roxanne's twisted hands, his eyes gradually turning sinister. Taking pictures? Didn't she love photography? Roxanne's hands would probably never hold a camera again. The next time he heard about Roxanne was a month later. News of the once famous photographer's fall from grace and entry into the adult film industry spread like wildfire across the internet. Some people even posted various photos and videos. But in the background of the videos, there was a cold, emotionless male voice. Alan frowned at the video content and quickly closed it. His stomach churned. The image flashed in his mind, making him want to vomit even more. However, Alan recognized the male voice in the background. Even if it was only for a few seconds, Alan was sure it was Frank. He just hadn't expected Roxanne to do something like that. Laura glanced at the phone he had casually placed on the table, her delicate brows furrowing. Stop looking at that garbage. Alan couldn't help but laugh at her feigned seriousness. Laura, why would Frank help Roxanne do something like that? He asked, genuinely puzzled. Doesn't Frank love Roxanne to death? Laura took the glass of water he offered and took a sip, not finding it sour at all. When it comes to money, do you really think he loves her? It was just for the cash. Alan nodded, half understanding. Roxanne deserved it. I'll take you out to eat later. What do you want? Anything. Alan wore a light blue shirt, his hair pulled back in a low bun, with a few stray strands of bangs falling casually across his forehead. It made him look even more bright and gentle. He was led forward by Laura, a white cloth covering his eyes. He had no idea what she was up to. A gentle breeze carried the faint scent of flowers past his nose. He heard Laura's warm, low voice. You can take it off now. The blindfold fell away. The wind from the river blew, and a bouquet of dazzling red roses was presented to him. Alan, you said my last proposal wasn't good enough. So this time I spent a whole month preparing. This time, will you marry me? Laura opened the ring box. Alan couldn't help but tear up. Seeing Laura's nervous expression, he suddenly smiled. Miss Brooke, this ring isn't sincere enough. He rarely saw Laura swallow so nervously. Alan, this is a family heirloom. If you don't like it, I'll take you to buy another one later. Alan smiled, his eyes full of happy tears. He held out his hand. I do. The calm, dark surface of the river suddenly erupted with a series of fireworks. The sound of celebration came through the phone. Suddenly, a hand snatched the phone away. Frank glanced at the screen, then stubbed out his still-lit cigarette on her bare skin. Someone's here. Roxanne lay on the bed, closing her eyes in pain. A tear seemed to slide from the corner of her eye.
Alan.
If she had known, she wouldn't have treated him like that. It was her fault. She was sorry. This was her punishment. I'm sorry.